I think I'm the bottleneck. The relief that I felt and the team felt from being able to fire a client. It's just funny how the universe works sometimes, but as soon as we said no to something, we get something else that comes along that's a much better fit. They're ready for a change in principle, but then when we actually get into the nitty-gritty, they don't really want to give it up or, make a step forward. Great leadership is not shying away from difficult conversations. We needed to have some kind of difficult conversation to bring the expectations back in line. We actually in the office have a back office space, calling that the back room of death. I'd be like, hey, grab a chair, let's go talk. And they're like, oh no, they're going to the back room of death.
Welcome to The Business Game, the show that breaks business down into real levels, from $0 to $200 billion, so founders can see exactly where they are and what comes next. Today's guest is playing at level 1, the founder survival stage. At this level, you're proving the model works. You're validating demand, refining positioning, and fighting for consistent revenue. The challenge? Doing almost everything yourself, hiring your first team member and stepping from practitioner into CEO. The goal? Turn expertise into traction and build momentum that's repeatable, not accidental.
I'm Steve Plummer.
And I'm Kalina Stano.
And today we're joined by Rachel Losser, founder of Losser Consulting Solutions.
Rachel has spent over a decade delivering some of the world's largest and most complex projects, helping organizations turn big ideas into actual results. Now she's building her own consulting firm and navigating the classic early game challenge, how to scale a business that delivers highly customized work. Let's dive in with Rachel Losser.
Before I started the company, when I was working, I found myself a lot working with tons of consultants. And every time I was working with a team, and as the project manager, most of the time I'm leading the group, I found myself often having to do project manager resets or set expectations for things that I considered to be pretty foundational or basic. And so watching all this unfold around me, trying to keep everybody herded and keep everybody working. And I just really thought, I think I can do this. I think I can do better. And I think I can do this differently and exceed expectations, as opposed to, a lot of cases, you're just trying to pull the work through. So yeah, that was kind of my motivation. And so far, so good.
Yeah, awesome. You saw a gap and you knew you could do better. That's a great recipe for a win.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Rachel, one of the things you mentioned that a huge breakthrough for your business was deciding not every client or project is there. What changed in the business once you went premium and started choosing your clients more carefully? Because as we all know, people in that that early phase of the business where you go out on your own, it's cash is king, right? And you're almost, I'll take anyone to get the business going. So I've got cash flow coming in, but you've mentioned that was a real change for you. So can you just talk us through that? How, was that a scary moment going, oh, I might be cutting off a lot of my revenue, or was that just a moment, flag in the sand, line in the sand, and things went really smoothly from there?
It was definitely something that took a lot of thought and was scary in concept at first, yes. But very quickly, the relief that I felt and the team felt from being able to fire a client or say no to a project that really wasn't a perfect fit. It's just funny how the universe works sometimes, but as soon as we said no to something, we get something else that comes along that's a much better fit. And it seems kind of silly to say, but it was just easy. Like we found that as soon as we got clear on the types of projects that we did want, we also were better at explaining the type of projects that we could deliver, which attracted the right type of person. And so it was all kind of this self-fulfilling engine and prophecy, that made it a lot easier to now go after the type of clients that we do want. So it's been a real delight. But yes, I can understand how that would sound scary.
Yeah. And just on that, someone in your shoes, as in a little bit behind where you were, they're kind of working out who I'm for, who I'm not for. Have you got any tidbits of advice for that process and how you came to your, where you wanted to be with that?
Yes, I think one of the things we try to suss out pretty early is the type of client that we're working with, their sort of capacity to engage, and not just on one specific project, but also thinking more strategically. Is this someone that's going to come to us and we can have some reoccurring projects and, kind of set something up?
Yeah.
So we're really trying to suss that out pretty early on. And we generally believe that the client is going to put their best foot forward also. And so if they are not putting their best foot forward in the beginning of the process where we're still getting to know each other, we haven't really found that it really gets better, So if they start to sort of, nickel and dime us early on or start asking for discounts right away, that's not something that usually gets better, right? It only gets worse over time, especially the more you give into it, the more they're going to try to push and push and take, right? And all that time, you could have been spending that time on a client that was ready to work with you and was going to be easy and fun to work with.
Yeah. I have heard it said that those types of clients are not like wine. They don't get better with age, right?
They do not get better with age.
Yeah. And so with that, do you have like a set criteria then that you've kind of built out to find these clients, or is it more to help, sort of guide that ship for you in choosing your client?
Yeah, I don't think we have any real firm criteria because it's less so about checking any specific boxes and more about the vibe and how much the client values us and how much, it's a culture fit as well, because we've had some clients that seemingly hit this like higher revenue number and we think that they're going to be a potentially great partner and, not as good of an experience as someone who's a little bit smaller, but really values what we bring and is willing to invest and ultimately gets great results, So it really just depends on the situation. And I think that's actually probably one of my biggest challenges as I think about my scalability and sort of leveling up is how do I help take some of that decision-making process and clarify it to other team members?
Yeah. Just on that, it's a really interesting thing. You mentioned there finding if they're a good fit. Are there some markers or some indications that they are a good fit or not a good fit? What are you looking for there? I'm fascinated by that, how you discern early on whether they, you said there's no real criteria, but they must show you some things from their side that you go, yeah, they're my type of people.
Yeah, I think it's probably some combination of them having some sense of an idea of what it is that they're looking for and having some idea of what the finish line looks like, right? Because otherwise we're all just going to be kind of the blind leading the blind, right? And we can give some ideas of best practices and, we are very opinionated about how to do things well, but ultimately if it doesn't fit for what their vision is or if they don't have a vision, it'll be hard for us to say we've actually arrived.
Yeah,
so I think definitely some aspect of that. Additionally, as we're sussing out and attempting to work together, I'm also thinking as much as we take the feedback and kind of suss that out, also how does the client take the feedback? Because it's funny to say, but we've had folks where they go to hire a consultant and then we start to get into the process, right? And then they don't actually want the feedback. They're not actually ready for a change. They're ready for a change in principle. But then when we actually get into the nitty gritty, they don't really want to give it up or, make a step forward. So yeah, we try to suss that out as much as possible and talk about the process early on as much as possible so that once we actually get into the work, we can get started and feel comfortable.
Yeah, it's going to land.
Just one other thing to add is we will often start with a smaller project to feel someone out, like a smaller discovery project or something like that, so that both sides get to know each other and feel comfortable about making a bigger investment.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good idea. I like that.
I love that. Ready for change in principle, but that doesn't necessarily translate to the real world, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I know a few people like that.
Absolutely.
Going back to sort of your journey so far, what would you say has been like the biggest bottleneck in business for you and what unlocked real momentum?
Gosh, by far, which sounds kind of silly to say, but I'm sure that folks get it. I think I'm the bottleneck.
Yes.
Like,
You know how many times we hear that?
To run across.
Said no founder
so many
ever,
things
right?
need to run across my desk.
And what is it about you that you think is the bottleneck?
So there's quite a few things that, have to come across my desk, or, I'm sort of a QA lens. I've also been really strategic in my hiring, in that I've hired a lot for attitude and aptitude.
Awesome.
And in a lot of cases, my team is still sort of understanding or learning all of the methodology. So there's got to be some checks and balances in the process. And so as I'm upskilling folks right now, and they're progressing very quickly, but definitely want to kind of keep those checkpoints in place. So running those projects, working with the team, and then also keeping all the background running. We have an operations manager who's amazing, but still there's some things that just have to cross the founder desk, and I'm trying to get rid of those things more and more. They can have them.
Yes. Yeah, it is definitely, that's a very common theme, isn't it? It's that letting go of control, which is really hard when it's your baby and you've put everything into it and you've gotten you this far. And like you said, you know that you need to get rid of these tasks, but at the moment you're kind of in that point where it's like, it still needs to be passed by you. And your time is limited, and so that's what. And so, how are you dealing with that? What are some things that you're putting into motion now to alleviate some of those extras?
I mean, a lot of the time, it's something as simple as, "Hey, I'm about to do this task, and it's something I'd love for you to do in the future. Like, just come shadow me and sit with me, and you can just see the process."
Yes,
I think there's a lot of different ways to sort of attempt to capture. We also use a lot of process capturing software so that if the team wasn't co-located or wasn't present, I could still take a recording of it and share that later. So there's that aspect. But then I think there's also just the aspect of, it's still my responsibility to create the accountability and make sure that I have a system for verifying that things are happening, which is obviously easier said than done, right? But I'm just asking to be copied on things, or we have our own task management platform. As you can expect, we're a project management group, so we've got checklists, out the wazoo.
Yeah.
And so, I have ways to check up with the team and make sure that things are still getting done. And more, I'm just focused on those handoff points and building trust.
Yeah. Okay.
And on that, obviously with the checklist and the project management, do you find it hard sometimes to not come across as though you're micromanaging, even though you kind of have to because of the way that you're sort of leading some of the people on your team and getting them to a certain point? How do you sort of sit that fine line?
It's actually very funny that you bring that up, because my team has actually referred to me as a reverse micromanager. Like, I am too trusting too quickly.
Wow.
And they sometimes would like a little bit of extra support, as we transition. So yeah, I don't know how to describe my sort of decision making on that, but I often see something in the team and I know that, they're able to do things, and I'm not going to throw them in or assign them something that's extremely mission critical and like just leave them to it, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are not that serious. It's a good learning opportunity. I can pair people up sometimes on projects, a more experienced person with a less experienced person, right? And just create systems where it's okay if something doesn't go exactly perfectly. Everyone's very well supported, but then the end all be all isn't with me necessarily.
Yeah.
It's an awesome way to be. I love that.
Yeah. You mentioned before, Rachel, I guess you're in the scaling phase. It's a bit of a pressure cooker where you're at right now in terms of high quality bespoke projects, but also trying to scale. You're kind of doing two things at once there. So I guess my question is, how do you stop every project from almost being a bottleneck or a prevention of that scaling that you're trying to achieve, and or not letting clients down because you're scaling?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and obviously something that we have to navigate every day. We are always trying to be a systems thinking type of group. And so if we do have a bespoke project or something that we sort of custom tailored for a client, and we think there's an opportunity to make that into a more permanent offering or something that's a little bit more repeatable in the future, we will actually take all of the assets that came out of that. We'll take all the learnings from that process, and we will sort of work to craft that into something that's more sustainable or more repeatable. In some cases, it's going to be either a portion of the offering or, some aspect of it that we think that we can sort of templatize and use going forward and still keep a kind of white glove service atmosphere to it, so it doesn't feel like sort of copy paste consulting, if you will.
Yeah. Okay.
And with that, like, what would you say in your journey so far? So particularly at this stage where you're building a team and growing that revenue, what would you say the challenge that has nearly broken you? Is there, I mean, you seem very calm, cool, and collected. I'm not sure that you would see it as that point, but if there has there been a moment?
I would say I am a complete workaholic. I work a ton. And I think probably if there's anything that could have broken me, it's just the amount of hours that I work. And, everybody's got to sleep. Everyone's got to stop and eat, so there's some of that aspect. But thankfully the team's grown and I'm doing much better now. That's probably it. Just the amount of time that you have in a day.
Yeah, sure. You're still so cheerful for someone who works so in that tight phase. It's a tough gig.
Yeah, I pay a lot for this. I'm very supported over here.
Okay. Got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. Can we talk about your leadership journey, I guess, here, Rachel? You mentioned before that you're a really, really good delegator. But what did you realize about yourself and your own leadership journey, through what you've done so far and how you've grown?
I think something that I was very surprised by in learning about myself is that my default operating mechanism when I'm stressed is to hold on to things. Mm-hmm. And that's not conducive for the delegation process and for, sort of kind of continual work delivery. So just to give a quick example, if we hop off a call, oftentimes I have a model where I'll be sort of the engagement lead and then the whole support team is there and then they're doing most of the work in the background and I just get to look good showing up to client meetings.
Amazing.
And so we'll show up to we'll finish up a meeting and there are deliverables that come out of that. I have a vision for some of what needs to happen. And because we're back to back or we're going on to the next meeting, I might not even make sure that the whole team is on the same page on what those deliverables are for a couple of days, as we start to see the next meeting coming. And so all of that was lost time because if I had just taken the time or we had a process in place to confirm what all the deliverables are, what the expectations are, the team can just get to work. So that's kind of the challenge there is just how do we make sure that everyone stays working and that things make it out of my brain into the team's hands as fast as possible.
Yeah. And did you have a piece of software or any sort of system that anyone listening to goes, actually, I've got that same problem. How can I bring that into the real world? Have you got any tips around that?
Yeah, I mean, we implement project management software, so I'm always hesitant to recommend a tool without knowing someone's requirements. And we talk about that a lot is that there's sort of, we call it golf course marketing where somebody says something to someone else and that sounds really flashy and cool. And we're going to go do that too. And oftentimes, the fit might not be quite right. And then, it doesn't work out. So we are always pretty cautious to recommend something, but there's a lot of project management software out there and or task management software. Yes. And the biggest thing for me to look out for is making the task entry really easy. I don't know if you've ever used a tool where just the act of putting in the information is so infuriating that you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And then,
So you just,
and then you
Yeah.
don't want to actually enter tasks or anything because
Yeah.
it's like, I can't type it. I have to click 47 things to like get my thoughts in there.
Yes.
So we try really hard to do like little hacks like that make it just easy for task entry. So like an example is in our software, like project management tool, we have just a spot called task inbox that's not related to any project. And you can just kind of go, I can do a brain dump. Anyone on the team can go do a brain dump. And someone on my team's job is to make sure that the inbox triage happens so we can just get the tasks where they need to go.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I actually want to just use that for my own personal life because I brain dump all the time. But it like, yeah, there needs to be like a triage. Like it can just sit somewhere and then it can be distributed as needed. I love that.
Exactly. So it's like little nuanced things like that I think just start to, accumulate over time and really help make an impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just on that, did you go through a few different types of products or systems, and you actually, I don't like that didn't work, or were you discerning enough that you've basically, it's all works pretty well now because you picked well at the start?
No, I think I'm infuriating. Like I'm constantly trying to nitpick something, make it better. Thankfully, my team also has kind of a continuous improvement mindset, but we are constantly thinking about how could we do this better? How can we integrate things better, right? How can we make it so that we have one hub of truth, that everyone's life is easier? Like a common problem that we have and our clients have is that, you have certain systems used for different things and then they're not talking or they're not collaborating. Like, so a common one would be your CRM doesn't necessarily connect to your task management platform. And so you sort of have tasks now living in two places because you have your follow-ups happening here, but then you have your tasks over here. And so we're constantly like, how can we just make it so there's one place for tasks so we don't need to juggle all of that?
That can get really complicated too, and I'm sure there's a lot of our listeners that can resonate, especially in that when you're in that early startup phase, is selecting the right system. And you've got different people and different learning types and behavioral types, and the systems speak to different people. I remember when I had a team, we had Trello, and then half the team wanted Trello and half of them wanted Monday. And I was like, well, they're completely different, like both. And so and then we had two different ones, and I was like, this is too chaotic. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I just think that you have to just know what your team wants. I'm a really big fan of a tool called Smartsheet. There's a lot that you can do with it, and it's kind of like really great for the folks that live their life on Excel. But I would never recommend something like that to, say, like a marketing agency.
No.
Because they're going to lose their minds. It's not pretty enough. It's not easy enough to get started necessarily, right? And so it's just like you kind of need to know your audience and know what the heck it is that they're trying to achieve.
Sure.
To be able to make that recommendation. Easier said than done.
Totally.
I guess you also don't want to die on the hill of a certain piece of software, right?
No,
like if it needs to change, it needs to change, right?
Yeah. So, you work with massive enterprise projects through your consulting business, and what would you say is the biggest misconception small founders have about how these large organizations actually execute the big initiatives? Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but
we got time.
I would say, I turn that around and say, what are some of the things that it takes to be successful? Because that might be easier, because there's so many things that can go wrong. So let's talk about, the things that it really takes to do something well, like a big enterprise project. You need top level down support. You need a team that understands the process very well. And you need someone in the group that's going to be able to really represent the business side of the equation, or the, whoever the so-called client is, right? So like in a pretty simple example of that is, we're a consultancy, and it's like our favorite thing, right? If you want to just bring us in and have us do everything, right? That sounds like a perfect scenario, but in fact, it's not, because we need the engagement to make sure that what we're doing isn't aligned with expectations all along the way, and that we're making the right decisions to be successful. And then when you start to think of an enterprise level project, that compounds tremendously, right? Because you're dealing with hundreds or even thousands of people that are impacted. there's so much messaging that needs to happen. I think there's like, not to nerd out on you too much, but I think there's like a formula to calculate the number of interactions or the number of communication streams, when you're dealing with a project, and it gets to be like in the thousands very quickly, right? When you're dealing with stakeholders. So there's just a lot of communication to manage. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing, is just making sure that everyone is aligned, that expectations in both directions, up and down, are happening, and everybody knows what to expect.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Rachel, you mentioned a moment ago that you're, what were the words, quite nitpicky, as in, you look at things, in great detail. So I'm just curious, from a leadership perspective, for the stage of the business that you're at, was there something personally you had to either start doing or stop doing to help the business grow?
In terms of helping the business grow, I think the main thing is I wanted to be involved in projects. And that is really how I started, right? It was just me in the beginning. And even in my network, oftentimes folks want to work with me directly. And as we scale, that becomes less and less feasible. So I would say the number one thing that I've had to stop doing is stop being the front face of projects, or be really, really strategic with how I engage in a project. So I just recently had an opportunity where it was a really great opportunity, and I could have been the primary lead on this project. And it was very important for me to say no to that, because I have a business to run, right? I can't be the lead of that project. I'm leading this project.
Yes.
So
yeah. Is that hard? Because obviously you started out because you knew that you loved the consultancy, you saw the gaps, you're like, I'm your girl, I know how to do this. But suddenly you've kind of changed a little bit and you found yourself in this founder seat, and you're kind of having to step back from doing this thing. How does that sit with you, and how do you deal with that? Because that would be challenging.
Did you start nitpicking yourself?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Hey guys, just a quick break to thank our affiliate partner, HubSpot. We are thrilled to announce our partnership with HubSpot, the ultimate all-in-one CRM platform. HubSpot helps you streamline marketing, sales, and customer service with powerful tools to grow your business faster. From lead generation to automations, it's got you covered. By using the link in the description, you not only get to start your HubSpot journey for free, but you'll also be supporting our work here on the show. Now it's back to today's episode.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't really had a chance to fully stop and smell the roses of it all,
Sure.
and really feel all the feelings. But in general, I'm feeling very fulfilled in the leadership side.
Awesome.
Very fulfilled in the strategy aspect. We have a lot of things, kind of cooking internally too for projects. So it's very fulfilling to have so much going on. And honestly, I felt a little bit handcuffed in the sort of quote unquote corporate world, because everything had to go through an approval process.
Yes.
You had to constantly fight for your right to do a project or, get buy-in. And it's been very freeing in a lot of ways to be able to be the kind of primary or sole decision maker, and move really at any pace or as fast as I'd like to. So far, it's been wonderful.
Oh, awesome. And have you pulled a lot of those learnings from that corporate space into the way that you lead, knowing that was difficult for you on the other end? Have you found new ways to make it easier for your staff?
Yes. I mean, yes, down to every single level and kind of molecule of how we operate, like we have a killer benefits package. We really strive to make the team feel super supported. And I feel very privileged in the, size that we are right now, that we're able to provide that level of deep support. But someone on my team, I always think of something that's really basic that was frustrating in a corporate environment. Like, I want my multicolored pens, or I want my colored dry erase markers, or whatever it is, right? And there can be mind-boggling how difficult it is to get something like that purchased. So for me, it's like, what can I do for my team to remove obstacles? Someone on the team asked for like an ergonomic, kind of like chair cushion. I'm like, yes, it'll be here tomorrow. Like, absolutely. Like, those are the types of things that make people feel really valued. And make their life easier. So that's kind of what it is for me. Just how can I support the team 100% in whatever I can.
Well, that's such a great way to lead. So your philosophy seems to be very much get shit done.
Yeah. GSD girl.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how do you create that accountability across your teams so that the projects actually move instead of getting stuck into those endless meetings and brain mapping and all that?
Yeah, I think it's two things. One, accountability starts with you. So you have to be accountable and your say-do ratio needs to be there, right? So if you say, hey, I'm going to send meeting notes or I'm going to send out these action items or we're going to have a meeting, you need to follow through on that. And that also helps to create an environment where others follow through, right? Sure. So that's the first thing. And the second piece of it is just taking the time up front to understand the process and understand what everyone's kind of push and pull is, because it's going to be really difficult to create an accountability where there's no trust and there's no understanding, right? I could very easily show up and say, hey, we're going to get this done in 2 weeks. Here's what you're going to do. Like here's the timeline. You must go forth and do this. How successful do you think that's going to be versus if I took all this time, to spend time with the team, understand what their needs are, understand what the handoff points are going to be. And then I'm really not even managing the individuals as much as I am just kind of the passing of work back and forth to get the job done.
Mm-hmm. When you're leading the complex initiatives or building something like an enterprise PMO, what does great leadership actually look like in practice? So if you zoom out, what sort of things are we seeing that constitutes great leadership?
Yeah, I think the one thing that immediately comes to mind for me when you think about great leadership is not shying away from difficult conversations.
Oh, yes.
So often we get brought in, we're doing a project, or I see that someone decides that we need to hire somebody, and that's not really the case. All that needed to happen is the person whose job that was just needed to be held accountable, or we needed to have some kind of difficult conversation to bring the expectations back in line. So when it comes to leadership, that's number one. And I think a lot of folks think that applies to just the work itself, but it also really applies to every aspect, even the work environment.
Yes.
Just like a quick example of that would be, I worked somewhere where a particular person in the office wore like really, really heavy fragrance. Like it was almost unbearable, right?
To taste
and
it.
was all the water cooler talk was about how you can't breathe in this office, right? It's insane. And one might think, I'm a leader, my focus is the work, I shouldn't have to address something like that. But when you go back to thinking about, okay, no, I need to support my team, like a part of supporting my team is pulling that person aside and being like, hey, in the nicest way possible, like you're laying it on real thick, is there anything we can do?
That's a really good way to say that.
To maybe like lower the level of cologne or perfume or something like that, right? And it's just like really little things that make the difference.
So a self-reflective moment then, how well do you fulfill that yourself?
In terms of being willing to have the difficult conversations?
Yeah, in terms of those leadership things like the difficult conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say that I love it, but I do. I love a good come to Jesus meeting. I love a good project reset. I love a good, let's pull back and have a quick chat about this. I enjoy it because part of that get shit done mentality is like, what's the fastest path to getting us to where we need to go? So if anything, I'm probably too quick to do that. And, maybe there's a little bit more finesse or a little bit more like kind of love and care that could have been put into the process because I'm very direct. We actually in the office have a kind of back office space that's not renovated, that wasn't sort of part of our initial office. And my team started calling that the back room of death, because we didn't really we're an open office. So anytime we needed to have feedback, I'd be like, hey, grab a chair, let's go talk.
They'd be going, uh-oh.
And they're like, oh no, they're going to the back room of death.
Uh-oh.
I'm like, oh no.
I tried hard. What have I done?
Yeah, we ended up taking someone back there to promote them, just to give some good
fun.
juju to that area.
Yeah, you could really lean into that.
Yeah.
That's fun. But I think, it's, circling back to that, I think it is really important, and it's such a missed thing for a lot of people, is they're worried to have those conversations, especially that, I don't want people to leave, or whatever it is that their fear is around having those conversations. But just do it, get it done. Like you said, you can move forward then, and the expectation has been reset. Everyone is on the same page. Let's keep moving forward. Because I think if you let those things sort of sit, it can fester, and then that sort of creates a ripple effect, and that just kind of makes bigger problems that didn't exist if you just dealt with it.
Took them to the room of death, right?
Yeah, took them to the room of death.
Absolutely. And just to kind of add on to that, if you had that conversation earlier, you probably could have had it in a much more rational place, because it wouldn't have been a big deal. And the longer it simmers, the more the emotions build up, the more the resentment could build up. Yeah. And so then you'll get to be a little bit more explosive later on. So quicker is always better, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Just if there's a niggle, just deal with it. So as you're scaling, you're building internal systems and technology to support your consulting process. What systems are becoming essential for you right now?
Probably our CRM, for sure. I can't keep straight all the different conversations that I've had, so we take very detailed notes in there. So that's been huge. And then I would also just say, kind of a tech nerd thing to say, but integrations, like we're constantly trying to figure out, how do I make it so that I only have one place that I have to enter something and the information just propagates where it needs to go, and kind of that efficiency lens. So, if I'm putting a person's email address in somewhere, like I never want to have to retype that or copy and paste that anywhere. That's the goal, at least.
Yes. Yeah.
So just on that, what structure helps keep things moving rather than chaotic? Because obviously projects, lots of moving parts. Have you got some tips around how you structure things so people, our listeners can go, actually, I could use that little tip in my business?
I mean, the most basic form of that is just making sure that there's time on the calendar to talk about it. Oftentimes folks aren't going to move something forward unless there's either a meeting or the threat of a meeting potentially. And it sounds, maybe interesting to say, or maybe some folks wouldn't agree if they're on the receiving end of this, but truly there's so many times where just having the meeting gets folks to go in and make their updates, or go and finish that little task before the meeting happens so that they can give a positive update on the meeting, especially if they're in a group where everyone else is delivering their tasks on time. There's kind of a peer pressure aspect to it. So I would say that's the default, is make sure that there's time already planned, kind of built in to follow up on things, or the day will get away from you and it's likely that you might not follow up. And then you'll, wake up 3 weeks later and realize you haven't made progress, right? Or,
Yeah. And did you know that instinctively, or was that something you learned along the way and you had to make changes as a result of that?
I think a lot of the project management, what I consider basics, is a little bit innate to just my way of thinking. But I think that there is at least some kind of baseline that you can go to for operating. Like a really common baseline for a project would be a weekly meeting. So I think you can kind of go to, if you're really unsure, just go and get a starting point and then feel it out and have the empowerment to make the adjustments. So, we had some cases where we'll start on a cadence like that and realize, oh gosh, weekly is not enough. We're using up all the time. We're going overtime. There's something going on. And so just keep an eye on that. And if that happens more than once or twice, then schedule the second part of the series and make the time. You just have to be really in tune with what's happening and be able to react to it and feel empowered to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, adaptive. So if someone was building a consultancy or, professional service firm like yours, but let's say they're 2 years behind where you are now, what's the shortcut that you wish someone had told you earlier?
The shortcut.
I know there's not a shortcut, but if there's like a little gold nugget, something that could help someone.
No, give us a shortcut. Come on, we all want a shortcut. We want a shortcut.
Yeah. Okay, two things to the sort of shortcut. One is that good work gets you more good work. In those services, you have to deliver on your promise. That is the fastest way to selling more business.
Yeah.
That is the best way to make sure that you're constantly growing, right? So that's got to be the main thing. I wouldn't say that we necessarily went astray on that, but it's surprising me how much that matters and how much further opportunity there could be that you didn't even maybe realize because you've done a good job. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I would say just being really thoughtful and intentional about the tools and partners that you work with and having controls in place to be able to kind of quickly on and offboard folks so that you can kind of make that progress and make those decisions really quickly, right? If they're not a hell yeah, then they're a no.
Yeah.
You have to surround yourself with people who are excellent or that are going to operate at the same level as you. And if they're not, it can be challenging, but you have to move on because it's your reputation on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And how are you having those conversations? What are the indicators for you finding those hell yeahs?
I am a pretty tough interview. So if you can make it past some of my tough questions and we choose to work together, that's kind of the first piece. And then I'm just keeping an eye on those things that I consider to be the basics, right? But that aren't so basic. It's one of those common sense is not so common type of moments. But are they delivering what they said they would? Are they doing it in the time frame that they said they would? Am I able to get a hold of that person when I need to? Just basic ways of working, but those little things matter a lot.
Yeah. I'm interested now. Can you throw me one of these tough questions?
Yeah. It was a good line, right? I'm a tough interviewer.
Yeah.
And somehow I get that sense that that's 100% spot on.
Yes,
right?
and I'm like, so now I'm curious about these like sort of tougher questions. What's one of the tougher questions? Do you have one that you kind of always, it's a non-negotiable must throw into the mix of an interview? Which, can you share it with us?
Yeah, one of my favorite questions to ask, and you get answers all over the place, is what does accountability mean to you?
Ooh, I like that. That's fantastic. What's the worst answer you've had to that?
Well, it's interesting because in my kind of answers that I'm looking for, like I'm looking for someone to say like the buck stops with me, like it's my responsibility. And so oftentimes I definitely notice when someone tries to read into the question or doesn't really understand like why I'm asking it and will kind of take the answer off in a different direction. So sometimes I have to follow up. But yeah, we get answers that are all over the place on that one.
It's kind of like, what's up? The intern with the two guys in the blender and they kind of go off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's one. I'm just always looking to make sure that the person is not just feeding me answers that I might want to hear, and I'm really trying to suss out like how do they think about things. So like another common one that I often ask, which is like such a true scenario in our business, is what happens if a work task gets assigned to you, you get zero feedback and there's no one available to help you, and we gave you a deadline for it. Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah. Is panic the right answer?
Like,
is that okay? Yeah, hit panic. Is
you
that
are
okay?
a tough interview. These are good questions, though.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
if you ask the right questions, you're going to find the right people.
Yeah. Actually, so what are you looking for in that answer? What's a red flag or a green flag in whatever they say there?
A red flag would be like, I'll just wait until you're available to ask you, or I'm just going to sit and wait until I get help. Like those would be red flags. A green flag would be someone mentally kind of walking through the process, trying to think of what resources are available to them. And ultimately, what I'm looking for is for someone to say that I'm going to put together a draft, or I'm going to do my best and do something, and look for feedback and hope that I didn't mess it up too badly.
Yeah. Just because one of the things business owners always talk about, I was going to say complain, but I'll be a little bit politically correct, is customers and team or staff, right? So have you got any other tips on hiring?
In general, I think it's just something that is hard to fit into the rest of everything that's going on, right? Because you're running the business, you're delivering on projects, right? You've got all these things that you're running, and hiring is just another, caveat or another example of something that you need to work on. And I definitely have found that if I ever skip any steps or go around any of those questions or forget to ask my accountability question, it can always bite me. So I think trust your gut more than anything, and make sure that you have kind of that process. And no matter how you found the reference, because it's very easy for me to say, oh, this was recommended by a really trusted source, and I kind of talked to them and got a sense of what they're about, and I feel good about it. Even then, I'm going to say, this is going to sound silly. This is might feel weird because I know you from other things, but we've got to go through the process.
Yeah. I am interested because I think that there'll be some listeners that would want to know about this, especially those startup founders, because you've sort of already spoken about how when you're starting the business, a lot of it relies on you and you're running that. But when is it the moment that you go, nope, okay, it's time to bring someone in. It's time for me to go and start running these interviews where it's time to bring in help? What's the point? Is there a point for you where you go, okay, that department needs someone to run it now. I can't do it.
I think it would be privileged of me to say that when the work feels overwhelming, you got to bring someone else in, right? I think that's kind of the more standard answer, is just to take a quick look at your capacity. Beyond kind of like a simple answer to me, I also think of the opportunity cost of me spending time on something. So, I have an operations manager, and she is fantastic. And all of those things I could do, but the cost of me spending time on that is that I'm not meeting with as many prospective clients. I'm not going to as many networking events. I'm not being out there, I'm not doing as many podcasts, right? And so there is a cost to all of it, and you just have to think about which cost is greater, and are you in a position to make that longer term play or that longer term investment, right? We're playing a really long game, and so it's really important to me to strategically staff and make sure that I'm pricing appropriately so that we can have some of those extra support services that are going to make us thrive in the long run.
Yeah. This is deciding, are we in a long game or a short game? And then,
exactly.
Run your price
and that could change. That could change.
Yes.
As you navigate and, work through the process, so just constantly be thinking about it and reevaluating.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, Rachel, one of the things we talk about on the business game is the concept of the boss fight, where those moments where things almost broke and you had to kind of fight your way through as the boss so things didn't break. And so a pointed question for you is, looking back, what was one moment where things almost did break, and how did you stabilize it or turn it around?
Yeah, I talked about the fact that we have a really, really generous time off policy. And at the end of last year, we had all really had a tough year. We've all been working a ton, and we pretty much everyone decided to take the last few weeks of the year off. And I had just a really tough time because payroll still needs to happen. There's a lot of things that still needed to happen that I hadn't done in a while. And there's still some expectations for projects. And I'm also thinking ahead and being strategic. And I know clients are going to come back in January and they're going to get amnesia about the fact that they were just gone for a few weeks. And we're going to get those, hey, this has been open for 3 or 4 weeks now. What's happening with this? Right. And it's so I already kind of knew what to expect, and wanted to be a little bit more proactive on our tasks as well to make sure that we were keeping things moving forward. So that was definitely a time where I felt I could have done a little bit better setting expectations or making sure that not everything was falling to me.
Yeah.
And we got through it, but I'm going to do it differently next time.
Yeah. It's just, the universe is terrible how you've almost got to go through that to know that, right? Like, it's, damn, why wouldn't I just have done that to save the pain twice shy kind of thing? You will know moving forward, I've got to do that differently. I
think the worst thing that you can do is go through something like that and not put a system in place or not take that learning and make sure that it doesn't happen again. I think a mistake is fine, but a mistake that happens multiple times,
not a mistake.
You're just setting yourself up to fail. Yeah,
totally. So if Losser Consulting suddenly doubled in clients tomorrow, what's one thing in the business today that would struggle to keep up with that growth?
We're very fortunate that we are kind of in this position now. It's kind of happening. And I'd say the biggest struggle is that screening process. And in general, in these kind of services-based organizations, the challenge is always marrying up the right talent at the right time for the right, kind of cultural fit and project. And I think that's just a challenge that we're going to always be navigating to some extent. And so to me, I would rather say no to a project than to put a half fit onto a project, because again, reputation is everything. And I have to make sure, since I can't be everywhere, that the folks that are on projects, we trust and feel that they're going to deliver the best outcome for our client.
Yeah, just ensuring there's that in alignment. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Time for quick fire?
It is.
All right, Rachel, one of the things we like to do on the business game is to ask you 10 quick fire questions to get to know the person behind the microphone just a little bit deeper. So we ask you, and we're going to fire them at you one at a time each and ask you to limit your answer to a couple of words or a sentence. So you ready to go?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
You ready, Colleen?
I'm ready.
You're ready. All right. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go.
Okay, here we go. So are you an Android or an iPhone person?
Android.
What's your coffee order?
A breve latte. It's a latte made with half and half.
Oh, yum.
Okay.
Yeah, my parents are all about half and half.
Office or work from home?
Oh, hybrid. I love both.
What was your first job?
My first job doing any kind of project management is I was a staff project manager at my university for like a engagement office.
Fun.
Okay. One piece of tech you couldn't live without?
I would have to say it's that Android. I have one that flips open and I can take a call on the go and even look at an Excel spreadsheet and it's like I'm in the office.
Awesome. Are you an early riser or a night owl?
Night owl.
All right. Your go-to productivity hack?
Ooh. I like to do all of my follow-ups first thing in the morning. So I keep a really good list and I will rattle off like 30 follow-ups right away and not look at any of the responses.
That's a good one. What's the best investment you've ever made?
Probably my iPad. I'm a handwritten notes person.
Yeah.
And I can do some like writing to text, that kind of stuff. I really love it.
Oh, awesome.
What's your book or podcast recommendation?
My Life Was Changed by Chris Voss and Never Split the Difference. It's a negotiation at the surface level. It's a negotiation book, but it really talks a lot about human interaction and the way that people think. Changed my life.
Awesome.
In what way? Quick follow-up. In what way did it change your life? I know this is going off script with our rapid fire, but I'm just curious.
I'm interested too.
Yeah, in what way did it change your life?
Chris came up with skills that you can use when you're interacting with people, and they're based in neuroscience. And the results that I've gotten out of that about how to ask better questions or how to be a better negotiator or how to suss out, with a client's going to be a bad client or a good client and, that process, all of those questions and the learnings from that have really changed how I approach interaction and business.
Ooh, awesome. I have to get my hands on that one. Yeah. So if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what career would you choose?
Oh, definitely something with dogs. Thank goodness I have this career because I like the kind of computer work and the mental stimulation, but we are a dog-loving company. Folks bring their dogs to the office all the time, so something around that.
Fun.
Alrighty, one final question. If business truly is a game, Rachel Losser, how do you define winning?
Making sure that I'm getting the outcome I want while doing so ethically and taking care of my team in the process. To me, winning is just meeting my financial goals, and I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, just meeting my financial goals and taking care of the team in the process.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for your time, your wisdom. I've really enjoyed this conversation, but that's all we've got time for. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to The Business Game and check out the playlist for the level of business that you're currently playing at. Rachel, before we check out, where can our followers find you?
Best way to get a hold of us is to go to losserconsultingsolutions.com.
Okay.
Or find me, Rachel Losser, on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Great.
Right.
Well, thank you so
Fantastic.
much.
Thanks, Rachel. Now, every founder is somewhere on the game board of the business game, from zero all the way to $200 billion. So choose your level, and we'll see you next time.